All right, folks, so let's take a look at how we can create our step sequencer in Max. So what I've got open here on the left is a Max, blank Max window, a new patch. You can create this in Max just by going to File, New Patcher. And so I'm going to talk about the UI of this first real fast, and then we'll dive into it. So starting at the top, we've got our zoom, and then this menu bar here lets us quickly add things to our patch. So the object is the fundamental object of Max. We can add that by clicking the object button. And then messages are also super important. We can add those. We can add comments really easily. Our toggle box, bang button, and other UI elements there. Different types of numbers, integers, floats, and signal numbers. And then we've got some sliders and knobs at the top. So this top bar is really how to add stuff to your patch. Um, I mostly use keyboard shortcuts for most of this stuff, but when you're first starting out, it can be very helpful to have these menus up at the top, just so you know like what even is available to use for the UI elements. Um, what I just did there, I clicked and dragged to select a number of objects, and I hit the delete key to get rid of them. You can also select objects individually by clicking on them, and you'll see they have a blue border and some control handles around them. When they're selected with those handles, I can resize objects. This can be helpful if I'm building a user interface and I want things to be more or less prominent. And again, hitting the delete key gets rid of them. On the left-hand side, we've got a collection of different objects and media files that you can quickly access to pull into your patch. For instance, here we've got some audio files that we can test and listen to. And if we want to use that file or we like that file, we can quickly click and drag it into our patch, and it's giving us that audio file then in a playlist object. These are convenient because they ship with Max. There's not a lot of them, but they're built into Max, so they're always available. Similarly, there's some video files and some images that we can work with very easily. Some code snippets, plugins, and then some other Vizy and Beat thing. These are for audio and visual effects, basically. At the top, the package manager is where we'll go to install essentially libraries, ways to extend Max. We'll talk about that later. Then at the bottom, there's two very important things. The lock and unlock. We need this to be able to interact with our patch. When our patch is unlocked, we can add stuff to the patch. When it's locked, we can interact with that stuff. Let me give you a quick example with the toggle button. So I'm going to hit the T key on my keyboard to create a toggle. I'll make it bigger. And you'll notice when I select it now, I'm getting that blue box that lets me move it around and change its size, but I can't actually turn the toggle on or off. If I go down and lock my patch and I click now, I can turn the toggle on and off, on, off, but I can't move it around on the screen and I can't resize it. So that's the difference between interacting with the patch or editing the patch. The keyboard shortcut for this is Command or Control E, depending on if you're on Mac or PC. That's a good one to get in your head right away because you'll be locking and unlocking a patch all the time. This little trajectory thing here is a presentation mode. We'll talk about that later. That's a way to dress up your patch and make it look really presentable for users or stakeholders versus having to look at all the code. And then over here we have some other debugging tools and key and MIDI map assignments, which we're not going to get into just yet. On the far right, we've got our audio meter and master gain control, and then the audio on-off button. When it's blue, it's on. When it's gray, it's off. That's for the entirety of the patch, and we'll look at that again in a bit. And then we've got some important flyouts here too. Um, the inspector will tell us more information about an element that we have selected. Things like the coloration of that object, if we want to change the colors of it, um, whether it's included in our presentation, uh, whether it's hidden or not, the size of it, right? So I adjusted it with these handles, but as we can see here, we can change the size of it here as well. A scripting name if we need that, other things. If we need the specific parameters for an object, we'll look at the inspector. The reference will tell us a little bit about the object, which can be very helpful. And then it will tell us some other attributes or messages that we can send to the toggle to change things about it. For instance, if we send it a message with at background color, it will change the background color of our toggle. So we can dynamically, for instance, change some of these inspector parameters as well using messages and attributes. But again, I'll get into that more later. Then the final thing I want to show over here is the Max console. This is incredibly helpful for debugging. Really quickly, let me show you this. I'm going to hit the N key to create a new object. That's the same as clicking this button up here. It shows you the N key shortcut there as well. I'm going to type print. I'm just going to make a print object. This only has one input. I'm going to connect it to the output of the toggle with a patch cord, and I do that by just clicking and dragging. So now these two objects are connected. Even if I move them around, they're going to stay connected. I'm going to lock my patch with Command E. And now when I hit this toggle, it's going to show me print 1. This print is referencing this print object here, and you can see this is really nice. When I mouse over this line in my console, it shows me with the highlighting where that's coming from in my patch. So if I have multiple prints, it'll show me where it's coming from. And then 1, the value that it received. If I hit this again, I'll get a 0 because it sends a 0 when we turn it off, right? So this is incredibly helpful for debugging. If you're trying to figure out why something isn't working, throwing a print into your sequence will tell you what values an object is receiving, and then you can check if those values are the values you expect or if they're not. All right, so let's take a look at how to build a sequencer. So if we think back to the index card demonstration that I gave at the beginning, we need a few things. So let's start adding those in. The first thing we need is that toggle. So there's my toggle box. We had that connected to a metro. So I'm going to hit N again for a new object, and I'm going to type in metro. And I have to give my metro a default setting, right? What is the rate that the metro is going to output? I'm going to say 1000. So that's going to give me 1 beat every 1000 milliseconds or every second. I'm going to connect my toggle to the metro so I can turn it on and off. And I want to be able to visualize this. If I lock my patch and turn this on and off now, it's going to appear that's nothing happening. The metro is outputting, but since it's not connected to anything, it's not going to do anything that I can see or hear. So I'm going to use another object just to visualize what the metro is doing, and that's going to be a bang button. I'm going to use the B key for that. This is an object that just outputs a bang when we click it. So similar to a toggle, we can click it, but as soon as I let go of the mouse, it turns itself off. And it doesn't actually send an off message, it only sends a bang on the click. It's more like a momentary button. So if we connect this up, right, it's going to trigger this bang button. The great thing about Max 2 is that if we hover over the inlets or outlets, it will give us some tooltips that can be helpful in figuring out not only what does an object want, but what it's going to output as well. So for instance, the metro, it's going to output ticks of the metronome. The bang button is going to cause the indicator to flash and bang and output. You'll also notice as I drag these things around, these red lines appear to help me get stuff in alignment. For me, I like to keep the patch organized. You'll see when you're working with Macs, these can very quickly get into spaghetti monster style things. So I try to avoid that by keeping the flow going top to bottom and left to right in my patch so it stays organized. Let's lock and try this now. Great. So now we can see every second we're getting this bang button to light up. And again, this is outputting a bang, which is the same thing the Metro is outputting. And we can see that again if we do a new object print and we look at what our Metro is doing, and we'll see every second we're getting a bang. I can click and drag these little handles on my patch cord, the green and the red, to move the patch cord terminuses around. So I could click that and drag that down to the bang button and see that I'm getting the exact same thing. With this cord selected, you'll see it's blue. I can also hit the delete key to get rid of it and then redrag it if I want. And I can select these chords just by clicking on them. Okay, so I'm going to leave this print over here in case I need it again, but I'm not going to leave it connected. If I get a lot of stuff in this console and it gets hard to keep track of or I lose a place of where I am, I can always use the X down here to clear it. All right, so what was our next thing? We needed to do a counter. We need to count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to say new object, counter, 1 to 3. And you can see immediately the counter, in fact, has way more inputs and outputs than I let on with the index cards. But we're going to work pretty much with the first two. But you can see some of these other ones. We can use a number to set if we want to count up 1, 2, 3, or down 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, right? Or up, down 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, etc. We can reset it immediately with bangs or numbers, depending on what we want to do. We can even change the min or max of the counter. So let's connect to the first one that's saying int or bangs are counted. That sets the counter value. So we're now counting, and if we connect our print, we will see that we're going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's great. This may be going a little slow for us. How do we make it faster or slower? We could come in here and change our metro to be like Metro 500. That'll reset the metro, which turns it off, even though our toggle is still selected. The toggle only outputs when it's first clicked. So if we change the metro, we need to hit this again to turn it back on. And we'll see we're now going faster. Another thing I can do is I can dynamically change the metro. If I look at this second inlet, it says set the metronome time interval. So I'm going to bring an integer number in here. I'm going to click the I key to bring an integer number box in, and I'm going to connect that here. And with my patch locked, I can enter any number in here to change my metro. So let's say I want to make it 750, so every 3/4 of a second. I can type a number in and hit enter. And we'll see it slows down a little bit. The metro changes. And this doesn't reset the whole metro. So this is cool. I can do this in real time, change the beats per minute or speed of my patch. I could make it really fast. Let's make it like 250. And now it's going super fast, almost faster than this thing can really blink for us to visualize anymore. It's going so fast, 4 times a second. All right, let's cool that down back to 500. All right, and so we're still getting our 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so then, let's see here, we don't actually want to print. We're going to select, right? So make a new object called select. And right, I need to tell it what we want to select. we want to select a 1, a 2, or a 3, the things that are coming out of our counter. So let me connect that. And you'll see it actually has this fourth one. This can be helpful sometimes too. This is going to tell us the input if it doesn't match. So this is, it's going to give us a bang if the input matches 1. There's 2. There's 3. And this is if it doesn't match. So I like to sometimes connect a print to that last one if it doesn't match so I can see what's going on and why it's not working. So for instance, let me make another number box. Put that in here as well. And you notice I can have multiple cords going into an inlet or coming out of an outlet. And if I put in the number 6, I get a print 6. It didn't work. Um, Not that it didn't work, but that the select isn't set up right now to do anything with the 6, so it goes out that last inlet. Okay. And let's just show you that this select is working. I'm going to put some bangs in here with the B key, connect each of these up. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Very nice. Okay, so now we're ready to start playing some audio. I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do that here. Uh, one of which is to make a simple beep, and I'm going to do this with some code from the super patch. So the super patch is something that I'm going to give you for each project. We'll update it, but it's just a little reference of some of the basic things of Max that will be helpful to you for the project. So if I want to make a beep, if I want to make a sound, one way I can do that is I can take a MIDI note number, run it through this quick beep subpatch that I made, and then run it into a gain and an easy DAC. And that stands for an easy digital analog converter. It's going to convert a digital signal into an analog signal that will play over the computer speakers. So for instance, if I click this note on this keyboard, it'll tell me that that C note is a 60 in MIDI, and this is going to turn that into a frequency, that number 60 into a frequency that's then going to play very briefly. So it's just like a beep. Uh, this is nice just to get us started. Different notes, different frequencies. 53 for the F, 65 for the high F. Okay. So with some numbers then, I can change the frequency. So for this, I'm not going to get into how the quick beep actually works just yet. Just know that you input a number and it outputs a frequency. I'm going to go into my patch. I'm going to copy this. This is one of the few times I'll say it's okay to copy and paste something um, into your patch. So you've got a quick beep now. However, these bangs going into the quick beep, that's not going to do anything. Quick beep can't work with a bang. It needs a number, right? I'm going to use this, which is make a beep, right, from here, to figure out the frequencies I want. I think I want that 60, that 53, and maybe that 57. Beep, bop, boop. Those are going to be my numbers. Now, when I come into Max to do this, I don't actually want to use a number box for this. I could do something like this, lock my patch and type in that 57. And that will reliably send the 57 over and over again every time it gets banged to the quick beep. The problem is if I save this patch, watch this. I'm going to save this patch as stuck demo. I'm going to save it into a new folder on my desktop. I'm also going to call this folder sec demo files. Save my patch in there. So that's saved. Now I'm going to close this patch. I'm going to go here, open recent, open that sec demo back up. It's a 0. Okay? So if I had got this all figured out and saved it and closed it and then open it again later or turn it in, it's going to, all these default number boxes go back to zero. Now, my Metro stayed hard coded at 500 if that's what I wanted, right? If I had changed that with this, that's going to disappear too. It's going to go back to 500. So you have to keep track of what you're adjusting in real time to find the parameters that you want versus what stuff you're hard coding into Max, like the 500, that it's going to remember for the future. Okay. So I do not want to use the number box there. I'm going to use a message. I can create a message by hitting M, and I can type a number into this. So I can type 57 into there. So now this is a message with 57, and it's going to stay that way um, for now. We could change it, but it's going to remember the 57 for now. And when we save it, when we open it again, watch, save, close it, go back, open recent, sec demo. There it is, 57 still there. Great. Messages and objects are one of the things that people get confused about the most. Objects are things that act on data. Messages are data that gets acted on. Okay. So you have to really differentiate these things in your mind. The objects are like functions, and the messages are like variables or content containers or the content itself. And the objects act on the content. You'll notice some stylistic differences to help you keep these things separated. The message has a solid dark gray background and rounded corners. Objects have a dark gray stripe in the middle and then medium gray top and bottom, and they have hard, sharp corners. Uh, so please try to keep that um, in mind when you're working on your patch. It's something that gets people when they're starting out a lot, and so I'm telling you about it now so it doesn't become a problem for you. Okay, so I want to connect this to my quick beep. I'm going to drag from my bang to there and then into there. Now, if I want to quickly multiply stuff out, if I highlight things like these two, I'm going to click and I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key and drag, and then again, and that will duplicate my code. And then I just need to connect these up. Okay, but I don't want the same note. I want different notes. So I'm going to do 60 and 53, I think. All right, so I've got all my notes going, but I'm not hearing anything because I still need to connect these to that EasyDeck to convert the digital to the analog. And I want to be mindful of my volume as well. There's a number of ways that we can work with volume. I'm going to show you two ways. The first is with that meter or that gain object. So gain with a tilde. So the tilde is telling Max that it's working with an MSP object, a Max signal processing object. And that's going to take an audio signal and manipulate it. These messages, right? The bangs, the ints, those are all Max. Those are all like numerical information. The signal processing is audio rate. It's traveling much faster and it needs to be worked with different objects. So we can make a gain object, and you'll see right now it comes in this vertical orientation. It will automatically switch to a horizontal once it's longer or once it's wider than it is tall. Um, that's up to you, really, how you want to work with this and what size you want it to be. The inputs and the outputs, though, remain the same in the same position. The inputs are always going to be at the top and the outputs are always going to be at the bottom. So I'm going to connect this, and you'll see this has a black and yellow cord. That means it's a signal, right? It's an MSP cord instead of a max cord. And then I need my EasyDeck. All right, here we go. So the EasyDeck has two inlets for the left and right channels. That corresponds to your normal stereo audio, your left speaker and your right speaker, or your left headphone and your right headphone. And with my gain though, I've got my scaled output, and then this is the slider value. So if I put a number box on here and connect that, you'll see that's a normal patch cord. That's going to give me a numerical representation of where this slider is at. That can be helpful for setting the slider in place or for knowing where I'm at. But it's not my second channel, right? So if I want left and right audio, I'm actually, since the quick beep is mono, it's just creating a signal. It doesn't have a channel. I'm just going to duplicate that signal and put it on both channels like that. And now if I pull this up high enough, we'll hear that beep. Great. So let's see. I'm going to do this for another one. And I'm going to connect it to the same EZDEC. I could um, make another one of these and connect it up like that. But the EZDEC is the same object. No matter how many of these I have in my patch, they are all actually programmatically the same object. So regardless of how I connect this up, if I do this or this, it's the same. That's important to keep in mind, which is why I sometimes like to use just one of these, because it's adding all of these signals together. That's important because they just get stacked on top of each other. And if the the signal strength gets too much gain, I can damage my speakers. I might damage my ears if I'm wearing headphones. So I want to be very mindful of my audio levels when I'm working with Max, and how much stuff I'm adding up into one of these. I can add a lot of stuff up if I know that my timing is spacing them out, right? And these files are short enough, or these sounds are short enough that they're not overlapping. If I crank my Metro up really fast and they start overlapping, that's when I'll run into problems. So I want to make sure when I'm setting this up that my Metro is going slow enough that only one of these is playing at a time and they're not overlapping. This is particularly important when you start working with audio files in here. You want your samples to be short so they don't um, overlap and create too much volume for your system, which is another reason why I like to use these games, because then I can watch where I'm at here. If it gets up here, it's going to clip. That's what I want to avoid. There's my other one. The nice thing about this, using two of these though, is that I can adjust the volume. So I might want a soft one and a loud one. I can do that. Um, I didn't mean to do that, but it's a good example too. The EZDEC itself is the power button for the master audio. It's the same as this audio on-off button here. So if I click these, it turns on. If I click this, it turns off. If I click this, those turn on. That's what I'm saying. They're all the same. They're all the same thing programmatically. I don't need that one. I can delete it. That instance representation of it. Okay, other things I can do with these gain sliders, I can connect the value of this one to this one. So now if I adjust this one, they're going to be the same. Maybe I want that. Maybe I don't. Like I said, maybe I want them at different values. If I want to adjust all of them quickly, it's very nice to be able to do that. But here's the problem, right? If I save this and close it and open it again, oops, these also, like the number box, go back to 0, which is really irritating. You don't want that to happen when we open up your work. So how to solve it? I'm going to show you two different ways. I can use this value to my advantage, right? I had on here a number box. So let's say I get this set and 117 is a value that I like for this one, and maybe this one I like being at 100. I can use another object called load mess, which is going to send a message when the patch loads. And the message is going to be whatever I put after load mess. So I'm going to say load mess 117. So when this patch loads, it's going to output the number 117. And that's it, only the first time when it loads. And so let's see here, what do I want to do? Let me get rid of this one. And just to show you what this does, I'm going to save this, open it again. And there we go. This one came in at 117. This one went back to 0 because it didn't have the load mess. So whenever I have one of these, I want to put a load mess on it to give it a default value. Another way that I can do this is a more mathy way is with a multiply object. But I'm working with signals. So I'm going to use a star, which is like a math for multiply, and a tilde because I'm working with audio signals, make it an MSP mathematic operation. I can give it a value. These values, when I'm working this way with the direct math manipulations of the signal, I want to use values between 0 and 1. 1 is 100%, 0 is 0%. So I'm going to say 0.8 for now. Try that out. So I don't want to put on the full volume, but 0.8. We'll see what that is. So this is going to give me my default multiplication is whatever comes in here, it's going to get multiplied by 0.8 and come out here. I can connect that up to my EasyDAC too. So now let's see if we can hear that one. And for this, I'm going to bring these down. So we're just listening to that one. There it is. Great. So you'll notice that I can't easily adjust this, or can I? Let me add in here another kind of number box. I'm going to hit F to create a flow num, or a floating point number. This is just like our integer number, but with the decimal place. I'm going to connect that to the right inlet. So this is saying left times this inlet. So then if I come in here and I say like 0.5, enter, it's going to get quieter. If I say 0.2, it's going to get really quiet. And you'll notice the 0.8 stays there though. So the 0.8 is my default. That's what's going to happen when the patch loads. But then I can change that with this. The tricky thing is that this, while it overrides the 0.8 when it's running, it doesn't visually override that. So I have to remember to keep this nearby so that I know if I've overridden that 0.8 or not. All right. So that's the basics of creating the step sequencer, right? So if we wanted to have more steps, right, instead of 1 to 3, we could have 1 to 16. Instead of select 1, 2, 3, we could have select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. Right? We can have more beats. The last thing I want to show you is how to add some audio files to this. And the audio files are going to work in a similar way to this quick beat. So if we recall from the beginning, I said you could pull in audio here. I want very short audio though, so I'm going to click and drag up here. This is showing me my shorter files. That's a short one. That's nice. Let me click and drag the bass in here. Oops. So my patch is locked, and I'm going to get this error message. I can't add things when I'm locked. So let me actually turn this off, then lock or unlock, and drag in my bass. So here's my bass. This is in a playlist object. So I can play a playlist object just by clicking this button. That doesn't help me if I want to code something, right? That's an interesting UI thing, that it doesn't help me in terms of code. I can also like turn on or off looping with the UI element, but again, it's not an algorithmic thing. So let's think about how we can manipulate this object with the code. And so I know that this object needs a 1 to start playing the first element in the list. This playlist only has one track, so one is going to be the only track, and zero will turn it off. But let's say I don't remember how it's an object or a message or something in Max works. How do I figure it out? I could Google it, but that can take some time. If you right click on any of these objects, the very first thing you're going to get in this contextual menu is open whatever the object is, help. And it will also tell you the name of the object, right? So looking at playlist, I wouldn't know that's what this is called. Nothing on this says playlist like counter or select does. So if I right click on it, it will tell me what it's called. And then if I open this, it's going to open my help file. And this is actually a Max patcher. And it's going to tell me how I can add files or remove clips or create this object, different things I can do with it, and it's going to give me an example of how it works in Patch. This is a patch. I can unlock it. I can select things. I can copy them, paste them into my patch, or work with them. What I want to be really careful about, though, is when I'm in edit mode, I can change the help file. I don't want to do that, right? So be sure not to change those and save those. You want to make sure that you uh, don't edit the help files, right? Oops, that's the reference. That's the equivalent to looking at this. Let me go back to the help here. Um, and it should give me a warning if I change something and try to close this. Do I want to save? No, I never want to save the help files. I want to leave them as they are. One last thing. You'll see up at the top, some objects will have more information about different aspects of the object, right? So here, if I go to playback, here's where it's showing me I can use this number box to play different tracks in the list. All right, but I'm just gonna use single track list, and I'm gonna use messages again, a one message and a zero message to turn it on and off. If I just connect the one, do that, we'll see it plays. It's a very short file, so it plays very fast. If I connect this to my DAC, there we go. Great. It's so fast I probably won't even be able to get my mouse over to the zero fast enough to turn it off. And for a sequencer, I don't really want to turn the stuff off. I just want it to play and stop, right? Which is the default state, so that's great. So for instance, let me take out my beep in the middle there, and I'm going to move this stuff over, move this stuff in. All right. Nice. I can turn this one back up and this one up. Cool. And I can do the same um, type of volume things with the playlist, right? So I can use the gain or uh, my multiplication thing here. Now, this is where it will get a little bit tricky. The playlist actually does have stereo, right? So I probably want left and right channels for my gains. I probably want both those channels to be the same or to adjust the same. So now I can do my two channels. Um, and you'll notice now it's getting a little messy, right? So I might want to move this further down so the chords aren't crossing everything. And I certainly don't want to double up on the playing of this. There we go. Okay. Again, you want to keep your stuff organized so that you can maintain your sanity. Uh, a final thing I guess I could show is that with my quick beeps or my audio tracks, right, I could just as well um, play two notes at the same time. So let me get that 60 back. And on my third note, I'm going to do two notes. Now, this is where I want to be careful, right? I'm playing two notes at the same time on my DAC. So I'm going to turn these both down to like 0.5 initially, just to make sure that I'm not clipping. And you can hear that bit of a chord, right? So now I can start building a chord. Okay, I think that that is enough for um, your first foray into Max. I've shown you everything you need to know um, for this project. One final thing, right? I was using the clips um, from the audio library here. I want you to find your own audio clips on the net. So when you download audio files, they'll come into your computer like this. If you click and drag across into Max, again, I need to be unlocked. Thank you, Max. Um, it'll create a playlist object with that file in there. Fantastic. Other things, other ways I can do that, if I hit new playlist tilde, it'll make me a playlist object, and then I can drag audio files into the playlist, is another way to do that. Now, this is super important. When I do that, I need to make sure that this file is also in the folder where I saved my patch. Right now, if I give this sequence demo file patch to someone else who has Max, they open it up, this file will not play. I'll get an error. It'll be problematic. I need to make sure that that file is also in this patch. Now this will work fine because the audio file and the patch are in the same folder. Other things I want to be mindful of, I don't like putting spaces in the file names uh, when I'm working with Max. The WAV file type or AIF works best usually. MP3, because of the compression on it, sometimes doesn't work that great. These files, for instance, with a lot of spaces, they'll work, um, but it can cause you problems further down the road, right? So I'd recommend changing your audio file names, any of the files you're working with in Max, to not have spaces in them, right? Otherwise, this connects up the exact same way as this one does. And I can have multiple files in here playing multiple different things. Okay, so that's your start on Max. Give it a try yourself. The best way to learn a new language like this is to practice and to experiment and think of it as play and not as uh, some super frustrating exercise. Approach it with a mindset of play. You'll do great. If you run into problems, come by our office hours. The Trying to email us about this is extremely complicated. As you can see, just by looking at this, it's a visual thing. We really need to be able to see it to help you debug it. So come to the office hours and we can help you out.